So now it's time to go through a step-by-step guide of how to run MateSel. So we will look at a very basic MateSel run, so just the index only for this particular run. And just for a bit of background context, so we know what parameters to set when we're doing this run, we're going to be looking at the TCP index, so it'll be a terminal example. We have a full number of views to potentially join from of 227, but ideally we want to target 200 U matings. We also have 16 RAMs to potentially join from. We want, of those 16 RAMs, we want whatever RAMs MateSel picks to use at least 20 times, so to at least have 20 U's mated, and an absolute maximum use of 40 U's allocated to that particular RAM. So important things to remember when we're thinking about setting up our MateSel run. So to be able to do this, we need to go onto the Sheep Genetics website. So click the link or log on to your Sheep Genetics website. You then need to find the Your Flocks box. So wherever your flock box is, and for the appropriate flock, you then need to click this MateSel button here. And just give me a minute and I'll get my MateSel up. So that will take you to the MateSel website here. So what we're going to do, because this is an example data set that I'm using, I'm going to select MateSel as the data set. I'm also going to select MateSel exercises here. But if it wasn't a MateSel exercise and it was, you're doing MateSel run for your actual flock, you would select the appropriate analysis. So either lamb plan or merino select, kid plan or Doonies. But in this case, we'll select MateSel, we'll select MateSel exercises. And then what you have to do is then create or select a run. So if you've previously used MateSel and you're just going in to refine or redo certain runs, you can press this select existing run, but because we're starting from scratch here, we're going to have to create an entire new run. So in terms of the run parameters, we're going to set that as default. We'll also choose an index, and remember that this example looked at TCP. So we'll find TCP here on the index list. We will then include a MateSel run name. So this is really important, and I am a bit slack at doing this sometimes, but we need to make this run name something that we're going to remember. So I've chosen to call it MateSel_workshop. And then what we need to do is create this MateSel run. So we'll select create MateSel run, and it tells us that the run ID has actually been created. And then we now need to go to select existing run and find the MateSel workshop run name. So I will select existing run. I will then go and find my MateSel workshop. It tells you the run ID and also the date of creation. So I'm going to select that, and that then lets me scroll down. I've got some run details. So if ever you are coming a bit unstuck with some MateSel issues, it's best to get this run ID and send that to us at Sheep Genetics, and also tell us your username as well. That's really important for us to be able to go back and find the log files to see what you've inputted, to see whether there's certain parameters that are maybe incorrect, or something's maybe incorrect with your mating list as well. So next section is this set run section here. So the first tab that we have to look at is our animal list. So what we're going to do is essentially load the files or load the animal list that we're going to give MateSel to work with. So I need to load the file. So I'll choose file. This will pop up with essentially a file directory. So find where you've saved your files on your computer. I've called mine MateSel_U, so I'm going to open that. Again, it's important that you need to save the name of your files correctly. So I'm going to call this MateSel_workshop_use. And then I'm going to load the file. So this has told me that it's loaded 227 animals. So I can click to preview here if I want to. It will come up with the IDs of these use. I can, if I wanted to, add in the min use, max use, and absolute min use at an individual animal level here. But I won't worry for this particular step. This would be also where you would check if your custom index or custom research breeding value has actually loaded correctly. So if you've got a custom index or research breeding value in your data file that you've imported, it will come into one of these columns here. So I've checked my list. I know that it's loaded correctly. So now I have to click this create list button. And then MateSel tells me that the list has been created, which is great. So I've loaded my U list. Now I have to go back and load my RAM list. So I'm going to do the exact same thing with my RAMs. I'm just going to be really mindful that I change the name to RAMs so I don't override the U list. I'm going to click load file again. That's told me that there's been 16 animals successfully loaded. I can click to preview here. Again, if I wanted to enter any individual animal min, max, or absolute min use, I could do that in this section here, but I don't need to do that. So now I'm just going to create this list, and that tells me that the MateSel work RAMs has actually been successfully loaded, which is great. So underneath that, I can select modify existing list if I wanted to. So for example, if I wanted to go into my use and update any custom column names, it's not necessary, but you can do it if you've got a lot of custom columns that you are using in MateSel. Again, if you then wanted to, oh, that button doesn't seem to be working, but essentially what this would do if you clicked at edit animals here is the ability to enter in any min, max, or absolute min uses at an individual animal level here too, but that's not working at the moment. So we'll go on to mating groups. So what we now need to do is add our male group. So in this file here, I need to find MateSel work RAMs. I need to add my male group to the run. So that's successfully added into the run here. I'm also going to add the female group in at this point in time too. So I've selected my MateSel work U list. Okay, my internet's just a little bit slow. So it's popping up with that modify list section. So I'm just going to get rid of those. Okay, so I've loaded my MateSel U list. I need to add my female group to the run. So that's successfully done now too. Another step that's really important here is that we need to actually join these groups. So this is a pretty simple basic run. We don't have multiple joining groups or AI or ET to consider here. So we've only got 2 joining groups. But if there was, if you had a RAM list, but a natural join list and an AI join list, you'd have to be mindful of that here. But we don't have that, so that's not a drama. So I'm going to actually go and actually join my use to my RAMs, and I'm going to do that by dragging my RAMs and dropping that over my use. So that now tells me that male group 1 is linked to female group 2. Sorry, so that's great. That's male group 1 is linked to female group 2. So MateSel is actually going to look at how appropriate these RAMs are and these U's are when looking at the mating decisions that it will come out with. So I can then go through and add actual further parameters. So remembering that we want a few additional things on top. We're not just mating all of the 227 U's, we're adding some additional parameters. So this is where I put these in at a list group level, not an individual animal level. So I'm looking at the males here, group number 1, males. This is where I can add in my min use. So if you're ever unsure about what a term in MateSel means, you can hover over the bold words and it will pop up with essentially a description of what that means. So in this min use section, I'm going to put down 20 because I want, of the RAMs that MateSel uses, I want at least 20 matings to be generated from those each. In this max use section, I'm going to put 40 here because again, I want an absolute maximum of 40 mating generations to be resulting out of these 16 RAMs, or potentially up to 16 RAMs. I'm not going to change anything else here. I'm going to leave this as is. MateSel will have certain defaults, so males can be used as backup is always defaulted to 1. If you wanted to change that, you could just change that to 0, but in this instance, we're going to leave it as 1. And then because I've updated the min use and max use, I'm going to click update and that's going to save against the RAMs. So I now need to go through and do the same thing with the use. So I'm not going to update anything in terms of the min, max, or absolute minimum use here for the use. What I am going to update though is this number of matings or selection proportion value. So that's currently defaulted at 30, but I'm going to update that to 200 because that's the number of matings that I ultimately want MateSel to generate from these two lists. I'm also going to update the minimum backups to 1 because I don't need two backup options for this particular example. So I'm then going to click update. Sorry, before I click update, I should just mention if you didn't drag and drop your use, you can actually select the male list to join to the female list here by selecting this and then pressing join. If you want to remove the link, you can press delete link here. But I don't need to do that, so I'm going to press update, and that's going to save against my RAM list and my U list. So that's great. And then the next thing that I'm going to change for this particular run, I'm just doing basic run parameters. So I'm just going to go in here. I don't have groupings or at least complex groupings. So I'm going to leave this as off. But what I am going to update is this number of matings to be generated. This is set at 2000 and that's fine to leave it as is, but just to make sure that MateSel has consistency across all parameters, so it does the actual optimum job. I'm just going to update this to 200. I've got my target degree set at 10 as a default. I'm not going to change that at all. And I won't talk through the additional tabs in this section or the advanced run parameters because we are just doing a basic run to start with. So that's all well and good. I've set up my mating groups. I've set my basic run parameters. So now I'm going to click Start MateSel Run. And MateSel is a little bit finicky sometimes, so just click this button once and give it, a few seconds to see whether it works. So because we are getting some red bars loading here, I can see that MateSel's starting to work. So I'm going to go down to this Run Output and View Output button here. And I'm going to scroll down. So this is where we see the frontier graph. And it tells us that the frontier chart is currently unavailable, but it is MateSel's running and working successfully. So it's actually starting to load the frontier graph, which we'll talk through in a second. I can also, once MateSel has finished, have a look at the run summary, trait histograms and sire summaries, but I prefer to do that in a different spot as well. So we see that the run status is still running under the console here, but remembering that I said that the console is a really good spot to check certain parameters have successfully been imported into MateSel. So you can have a look at the total number of candidates, remembering that the U list that we had 227 U's in total. The males had 16 candidates here in total. So that's a good first step. We can scroll down and see the total number of matings was set at 200. So that's great that that's taking that into consideration as well. And you can scroll down. A lot of this won't necessarily mean anything unless there's an error that pops up. So you can scroll all the way down to the bottom here and just check that the job is done. So it's still set as run status collating, but MateSel has actually run the software to identify the most optimum joining outcome for these particular list of U's and RAMs, and we have a frontier built as well here too. So we'll talk through this frontier and then we can talk through the rest of the bit. So for this particular run, we've got a pretty good result ultimately. We've got a nice high index, so an index average of 116 with a target degrees of 9 here. So we put a target degree of 10 in ideally, so MateSel's gone to the first blue dot on the frontier graph. So the green line, so the target degrees is set at 10, and then our result is a nice high index, so we're not really having to lose or sacrifice our index for the achieved target degrees that we've set, which is really great to see. So MateSel should be done running now, so we can have a look at these other run summary parameters. So in terms of the full parameters, this is what you set when you set the MateSel run, so the number of matings to be generated, just cross-check that, make sure that that makes sense based on what you've inputted. Same with the target degrees. This is the console, so exact same thing that was on this Frontier tab, so you don't need to recheck that one. The candidates, so just double checking that there was, 16 candidates that were inputted successfully, 200 female candidates inputted successfully. You can see the total number of sires that were selected here. So of the 16, MateSel actually chose 6 to create potential future progeny from. And MateSel's also selected 200 dams as well. In terms of the target degrees, the fitness is 97, so a nice, really high fitness. Remembering that the higher the fitness, the closer that MateSel's result is to what you've actually input. So it's essentially a indicator of how well MateSel has actually done when achieving the expected progeny output. The target degrees, this is what you set, or what I set when I was setting up the MateSel run, and then the achieved target degrees. Remember, we want to keep these two pretty similar. Same with the co-ancestry. This was the target co-ancestry, and then what was achieved. So it's pretty similar again, so that's good. You can also have a look at the average of the progeny index that was achieved. So that's an average index of TCP of 116. Also having a look at the lowest male selected, lowest female selected, and then the standard deviation as well. You can also have a look at the inbreeding constraints. So remember, anywhere on MateSel that is F, F means inbreeding. So we have an inbreeding achieved average for the progeny of this particular joining of 3%, so nice and low, which is good. You can have a look at the weighting that was placed, and also the maximum inbreeding achieved in the progeny. So a max of 7%. So if you wanted to go through and reduce this, you could go through and add more target degrees into the MateSel run for your next run as well. We can also have a look at the default trait histograms. So this section doesn't work for every single trait, so I don't love to use it. What I like to do instead of the next little bit is go down to the download output section, and then I can download the MateSel Matings Excel file, which will download onto my computer. I'm then going to go onto the MateSel results tool, which I will link to you guys. And then I'm going to find my outmatings file. I'm going to drag it and drop it. If you don't know how to do that, you can also select browse, and that will pop up with an option of finding it on your computer in your downloads section, most likely. But that's loaded, so I've got upload complete, which is great. So essentially what this is doing is loading in the Excel file that we talked through earlier. So we've got the sire, we've got the dam, and then we've got the mid-parent breeding value of the expected mating from these two animals as well. And we have a whole heap of individual traits here, so we can go through and have a look at the average, the max, the min for individual traits if you wanted to. Some things that you want to, I guess, go through on this MateSel results tool is this trait histogram section. So this shows you the distribution of the mid-parent breeding value for the selected trait. So if I really wanted to work on focusing on improving my weaning weight, for example, I could have a look at what the trait distribution is here. And I can see that it's about an average of 10.8. So if I wanted to increase the average progeny, or average expected progeny outcome from this joining for weaning weight, for example, I could then go back into MateSel. I can go to my traits section, and I can go and find weaning weight. I can find weaning weight here. I can then add this trait to the run. I need to make sure that it's active, and then what I want to do is increase the mean. So I could do that and then rerun MateSel. You can do this for as many traits as you like, and just cross-check this distribution of your mid-parent breeding value of the expected progeny outcome from the mating. And then the other thing that I really like to do is check the sire usage summary. So this tells me how effective and whether MateSel's actually accurately adhered to the parameters that I've set in terms of the max and min uses. So it tells you the size that it's chose to join in terms of the most optimal outcome for genetic gain, but also genetic diversity. And it tells you the number of times that sire has been used. So what I want to check here is that no sire has been used less than 20 times and no sire has been used more than 40 times. And this is perfect. This is within the range. That's great. If this wasn't, so say for example, if this was 15, I'd have to go back and check what my parameters were that I input to MateSel because maybe I'd made a typo or an error somewhere. The other thing that you can do for your MateSel results tool is have a look at the distribution in mid-parent breeding value for the size that you've selected as well. So this is a really, I guess, cool way to go through and see if you can tidy up the parameters that you set. So if you wanted to get rid of, this sire, for example, who has the lowest average weaning weight of the progeny selected, you could go through and change your parameters in MateSel to make sure that this sire wasn't used anymore and that your weaning weight average of the progeny outcome therefore would be higher because you're not using this particular sire as well. So that's essentially it in terms of the MateSel basic run. We will go through a more complex run when we do the workshop.